The game was simple. There'd be 12 boxes on the table, 10 empty, and 2 with a watch inside. The catch was they all looked the same. Each contestant would get 3 picks. If they picked 2 empty boxes, they were out of the game. The show's host, a man named Monty Haldeman, who went by the nickname Too Tall, watched with amusement as a new batch of contestants nervously approached the table. It was the early 80s, and the country was enamored with game shows. One of the most popular at the time was Let's Make a Deal, hosted by Monty Hall. And among its many wacky games, one stood out. It was called Late Nights, Early Mornings, or more colloquially, the Hustler's Game. Its objective was to pick the boxes with the watches hidden underneath. It was a perfect fit for Hall's style of showmanship. As the years passed, the game became a fan favorite and a cultural touchstone. People would dress up as the game's characters for Halloween, and children would spend hours drawing pictures of it to show their parents when they got home from school. But even with the show's success, no one knew that it was about to take an unexpected turn. Hall was born into show business. His father was an agent who represented famous comedians like Danny Kaye and Red Skelton. So it was only fitting that when he grew up, Monty followed in his footsteps. He studied theater in college, and then got a job hosting a local talk show in Syracuse, New York. From there, he worked his way up, moving to bigger markets, meeting celebrities, and learning how to keep an audience entertained. By the 60s, he was ready for prime time and landed a gig hosting a show called It's a Great Life. But after 5 years, it was canceled due to low ratings. Fortunately, Hall had another trick up his sleeve. During his off time, he had been working on a new game show idea. It was based on an old radio program called Lingo, which was itself adapted from a language game by philosopher Ludwig Wittgenstein. But Hall had some new ideas about how to make it more exciting. He wanted to include prizes and eliminate the quiz show's reliance on contestants knowing obscure facts. It was this pitch that led him to create the iconic show Lingo, which premiered in 1964. Over the next few years, the show became a hit. Audiences loved the fast-paced wordplay and Hall's ability to keep the energy high. But behind the scenes, the host wasn't as happy. He was feeling creatively unfulfilled and wanted to try something new. What he needed was a fresh concept that would allow him to showcase his skills as a showman. That's when he came across an old carnival game called Dizzy Days, also known as Pick Pick Win-A-Watch. All the player had to do was spin a wheel and land on a spot with a prize underneath. But the challenge was that they couldn't see what they were picking. There were cameras placed above the wheel, so the host could look down and direct the action, guiding players to the right spots and building suspense. Monty Hall knew he had stumbled upon something special. With a few minor tweaks, he could turn this carnival game into a major television event. Started by changing the name to Late Nights, Early Mornings, which alluded to the carnival roots of the game. But he knew he needed to add some theatrics. He decided to have the prizes hidden in boxes instead of under a wheel. And then came the signature element of the show, the box design. They were painted to look exactly the same, with each one featuring a different design on the top and bottom. This ensured that the audience could tell which box was empty and which had a prize until it was opened. It was this unpredictability that made the game so exciting and kept viewers on the edge of their seats. As for the prizes, Hall wanted to offer something that everyone could appreciate. He settled on watches because they were small enough to be easily hidden, but valuable enough to entice people to play. Plus, they had a timeless appeal that transcended age and gender. Before long, Hall had everything in place for his new game show. He recruited a team of carpenters to build the iconic boxes and assembled a crew to help him film the first episode. He invited friends and family to serve as the audience, and on March 1973, they gathered together in the New York City studio to watch history in the making. The show started off slowly, with the first few episodes receiving mixed reviews. Some critics praised the game's simplicity, and others thought it was too derivative of other game shows. But Hall was confident that it just needed time to find its audience. In the meantime, he continued to promote the show, appearing on other programs and doing interviews. And then suddenly, overnight, everything changed. The show became a sensation. Viewers were glued to their televisions as they watched contestants try their luck at winning the grand prize. Parents would call up the network asking why the show was being filmed in black and white. To them, It looked so realistic that they couldn't believe it was actually color. Even President Richard Nixon got in on the fun, appearing on the show in 1974 and picking the box with the watch. It was clear to Hall that he had created something special, a game show that had captured the imagination of the American public. But even as the show's popularity soared, he knew he couldn't rest on his laurels. He had to constantly come up with new ways to keep the game fresh and exciting. Over the years, he introduced different themes, graphics, and prizes to keep the audience engaged. He even had celebrity guests appear on the show and compete for charity. But no matter what changes he made, there was one thing that remained constant: the joy that people experienced when they won the grand prize. There was something inexplicably thrilling about watching someone walk away with a box that contained a watch. It was a moment of pure excitement and anticipation. But even as the show reached new heights, Hall knew that it wouldn't last forever. Game shows were cyclical, and eventually the public would move on to something else. But he was content with what he had accomplished. He had created a game that had brought happiness to millions of people around the world. As the final episode of the original run aired in 1980, Hall felt a sense of pride. He had taken a simple idea and turned it into a cultural phenomenon. But little did he know that the story of Let's Make a Deal was just beginning. In the late 80s, game shows were making a comeback, and Hall knew it was time to bring back his iconic creation. He began working on a revival that would update the show for a new generation, while staying true to the original format. He wanted to keep the classic games, but also introduce new ones that would appeal to younger audiences. After months of planning, the new version of Let Us Make a Deal premiered in 1983. The set was brighter and more colorful, and the prizes were more extravagant. But at its core, it was still the same game show that people had fallen in love with. Hall was excited to introduce the show to a new audience, but he knew he had big shoes to fill. The original version had become a cultural touchstone, and he wanted to honor that while also making the show his own. But as the years passed, he began to feel the weight of expectation. Viewers were comparing the new version to the old one, and some were as forgiving when it came to the changes. But Hall pressed on, determined to make the show the best it could be. He continued to innovate, coming up with new games and challenges that tested people's knowledge, skills, and luck.
Right.
He also brought back some of the classics that fans had been clamoring for. And slowly but surely, he won over the hearts and minds of a new generation of viewers. But as the show's popularity grew, so did the competition. Now, the game shows were taking notice of the success of Let Us Make a Deal and trying to copy its format. Hall knew that he had to keep the show fresh and exciting if he wanted to stay ahead of the pack. And so he continued to push himself, coming up with new ways to keep the show entertaining. He introduced celebrity guests, themed weeks, and interactive segments that involved the audience. But despite the competition, Let's Make a Deal continued to thrive. It became a mainstay in the game show genre, known for its fast-paced action, zany characters, and of course, the iconic boxes. Hall's influence on pop culture was undeniable. He created a game that had become a part of the American lexicon, and as the years passed, he continued to inspire other creators. Game shows began incorporating elements of Let's Make a Deal, such as hidden prizes and audience participation. And even non-game shows couldn't resist the allure of the boxes.
Nice.
They became a popular prop on sitcoms and talk shows, often used to signify surprise or mystery. Throughout it all, Hall remained humble, knowing that the success of the show was due to the hard work of everyone involved. He gave credit to his crew and cast, and never forgot the impact that the show had on his life. In the early 2000s, Hall's health began to decline, and he eventually retired from hosting Let's Make a Deal. But even as he stepped back, he knew that the show would live on. It had become a part of television history and would continue to entertain generations to come. And so as we look back on the legacy of Let's Make a Deal, we can see the impact that one man had on pop culture. Monty Hall created a game that has stood the test of time, and for that, we should all be grateful. Thank you for watching.